Welcome to Lieven and Marcelo's Criminology podcast, a podcast hosted by Marcelo Aevi from the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, and Lieven Pauwels from Ghent University, Belgium. We aim to draw a map of the state of criminology across Europe through the words of contemporary criminologists. How is criminology defined and taught? Which are the main lines of research? Which are the main schools of thought in each country? These and many other questions are answered here by fellow researchers who share their vision on the development of criminology in their countries from its beginnings to the second decade of the 21st century. If you want to know and compare their stories, stay tuned.
Today we are interviewing Aleksandras Dobryninas. Aleksandras Dobryninas is professor of criminology at Vilnius University in Lithuania. He is a former president of the European Society of Criminology. Professor Aleksandras Dobryninas' research interests are the theoretical and especially also the philosophical aspects of criminological knowledge. Topical research interests are corruption, violent crime, the relationship between media and crime, confidence and trust in criminal justice institutions. This interview was conducted on the 7th October 2022.
Hello, Aleksandras Dobryninas.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Me also.
Again, thank you for accepting the invitation to participate in the podcast.
Yeah,
So we have an introduction that describes a little bit your position. I will not repeat it here, and perhaps we could start going through our guidelines for the interviews and discuss about how criminology is defined in Lithuania.
Oh, if briefly, it's on the moving and it's advancing. So we're just growing up. So I don't know. Maybe in order to understand our position right now, we have to briefly to observe how criminology started in Lithuania, because Lithuania from the one hand looks like a moderate state, just appeared in political international discourse just recently as independent state, probably mostly concentrated on the last 30 years. But first of all, Lithuania as a state has a much longer history. It's a very old state, old European state. So, but with a very complicated, let's say, history. It was independent state. It was created, some union with Poland after it was occupied by Russia. After it was in the beginning of 20th century, it's just restore independence as a Lithuanian state. After it will again lost independence because of famous historical events, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. It was under the control of Soviet Union. It was occupied by Soviet Union, and actually only recently, only 30 years ago, so we reestablished independence. And actually, our history of criminology, it's very much depend on state history. So, but if we go directly to criminological issues, so the first elements of criminology probably was elaborated just in the first independence. I mean, in between the Second World War, it was first attempts. It was not concrete criminological studies. Sometimes it was under the umbrella of criminalistics. So maybe it was popular, by the way, in Europe this time. But it was it was emerging criminology, but unfortunately it was finished together with independence, because in Soviet Union criminology was not allowed science. So it's probably a different story what's happened with criminology in
Can you expand a little bit on this? You say that criminology did not exist or was not allowed to exist during the time of the USSR. But
No,
there was
it's again it's two different different part of story. Again, it's probably closer to the history of Russian criminology. Probably I'm not expert
okay.
on this issue, but briefly what I know, for example, it was developed, for example, in the beginning of the Soviet Union. In 20s might be, but it was more oriented in let's say biosocial approaches. So, but it was okay. It was against official Marxist ideology, which actually emphasizing on social intervention, and just because of this fact, as I know, all these attempts was completely destroyed, prohibited, and so on. If we look at Lithuanian criminology, actually we also saw some interest with for so-called biosocial criminology elements. So it's again it's only beginning. I can't state that it was very strong approach because there were no research in this field, but it's only just sharing the ideas about how we can explain crime, how we can explain, for example, some social problems that Lithuania at the time faced with. So it was obvious that when Lithuania was occupied, of course, there were no chance to develop independent science. And actually, under the Soviet regime, the criminology was started among Lithuanian scholars. Only liberalization of scientific policy or academic policy in Soviet Union. It's happened in 60s. So, and just in this time it was re-established. But again, it was re-established under the very strong Marxist control or this communist control, communist ideology. I just want to remind you, what does it mean? It means that actually in communist societies there are no crime. So it was, again, we can go deeper to this theory, for example, to Pashukanis and, Vyshinsky and the other Soviet type, let's say, legal philosophers and legal theoreticians. And at the same time, especially Pashukanis was, by the way, he has a Lithuanian origin. No, he not, his grandfather was from Kaunas. So actually, Lithuania produced, at least from this point of view, from genetic point of view, some other famous criminologists. For example, Stanley Cohen, his grandfather and father's parents comes from Lithuania as well, to South Africa and then. But okay, but it's coming back to what's happened with Soviet Union and with development of so-called Soviet criminology in Lithuania. It was just oriented in the fact that in socialist societies, that actually, according to this Marxist ideology, was kind of transition state between capitalist society and communist society. So crime just exists, but crime as a phenomenon of bourgeois culture in the socialist culture, and because of this fact, so this phenomenon should be fight. So, and by the way, it was very strict rhetoric in criminology. We do not control crime, for example. We're just fighting crime in this time. So probably not we, but those criminologists who developed this field. And of course, it was at the same time a kind of managerial approach, because Soviet criminologists were interesting to control situation, for example, in the field like juvenile delinquency. So it was in Soviet terminology, it's called criminality of juveniles. So, or for example, it was again very important for this kind of research was elements, for example, of economic crime against so-called socialist property. It's again, it's very specific element for very much related to this kind of criminology. And at the same time, it was very separate, very idealized and very separate part of criminology. I can call it that it's completely science. On the one hand, it was a very research and analysis of, for example, criminal statistics, but a criminal statistic was completely unreliable because it was, just oriented in Marxist dogma that tomorrow will be better than today, and and that, of course, the crime, should be reduced year by year. So some kind of crime just was not recorded. For example, kind of crime related to drug users, because because Soviet people can't use. Yeah, but again, it's very strange picture of the criminological studies. I remember when I was a young scholar, and my article, first research, was in, I believe, in 1980. So it was related to special distribution of crime. So my colleagues and I just decided how we can get reliable data, because all data actually was spoiled. And suddenly we get data from Latvia, from our colleagues from Latvia, because Minister of Interior, who was responsible for criminal statistics, decided before leaving his position to allow to record all all crimes in Latvia. It was scandal. It was this statistic was very, I don't remember, but it was not allowed even to use publicly. But in Lithuania we had opportunity to get the statistics, and my first research was based on more or less reliable data about distribution of of crime in Latvia, not in Lithuania. In Lithuania it was still under the strange control, and actually it was a kind of secret for society. It was fake statistics, but at the same time, it's even fake statistic was not allowed for public discussion. So it's just a short presentation what we have in Soviet Union. But again, in Soviet Union we have different stage, because it was, for example, one stage with repression, with political repression, so-called Stalinist period, and again it was repression against Lithuanian. I just want to remember you that about 100,000 Lithuanians were just sent to Siberia, but just for nothing, just as a potential enemies for the socialistic states. So, but at the same time, at the closer to the end of Soviet Union, the ability to do more or less independent research was broader. And another issue, what is important, that actually, again, due to the ideological position of Soviet authorities, so it was prohibited to use Western literature. Actually, Western literature was also prohibited. There was no possible to get free access. So usually for example, Soviet criminologists can learn about the development of criminology in Europe, for example, or in North America, or in Australia. It comes through very, very strong filter of, ideological filter, or even just not mentioned at all. So it's what's happened. But nevertheless, closer to the end of Soviet Union, it was more freedom, at least, to get this access through our colleagues, for example, and we can just were able to do more or less independent research. And it's again, it's in 80s. It was possible to create alternative to Soviet criminology network in the Baltic countries. It was so-called Baltic Seminar. It still exists, by the way, and you are welcome to come. Marcel, you probably remember I mentioned this seminar. Yeah. The first seminar happened in 1985, so in Estonia. And it was first platform for free discussion of criminological issues, and at the same time it was very encouraging to develop absolutely different, not related to Marxist dogma, criminological theories. So it was a beginning. After in 90s, as probably we proclaimed independence. It's re-established independence from Soviet Union, and it's started new era period of development of criminology. Criminology, it's could be free. The problem was only that the heritage of Soviet criminology, because a person who worked in criminological field professional criminologists, let's say, they usually get education in Russia, for example. Usually they're defending their PhD in Moscow. Again, it was under some control. And there are interesting stories. For example, I remember Yuri Sar, my friend and colleagues from Estonia. He defended his PhD on I believe in juvenile delinquency, or psychological aspect of his psychological education. And he remember how it was difficult, just to defend for those who are actually thinking differently. And it's happened even in during the eve of Soviet Union. So but at the same time there were so-called group of persons who developed criminology in different way. Who, for example, my teaching criminology, Professor Blustein. So and we start to move in different direction. By the way, we published with my teacher a book. It was possible this time published only in Russian language. It's book about foundation of criminology. It's a logical and philosophical introduction to philosophical aspect. And because I myself have different education, mathematics. I graduated from mathematics, and next my education I defend PhD in philosophy. So actually I was better access to philosophical ideas. It was more open, at least for us, than for example, the criminology. So it was possible to use absolutely different methodology to understand, for example, some criminological issue. In our case, it was phenomenological approach to understanding criminology, approach used on ideas of Alfred Schutz, and so on. This was absolutely different aspect and different understanding how we can treat criminology. So, and by the way, some ideas from this period I still use and elaborate even right now, because it's more universal and not depend on some kind of ideological control. And at the same time, we have developed some programs in different universities. Of course, in my university, there were a program of criminology. But again, it's in the rest of European countries. Criminology mostly developed in the law faculties or law schools. Again, it's very very interesting phenomena, because in 19th century criminology started not in at law faculties. Pioneers of criminological knowledge were economists, mathematicians, medical doctors. Only later, closer to 19th century, lawyers, Ferry and Lisa and others will come to this criminological knowledge. It's very interesting phenomena. And again, if you look carefully, so it at least in the beginning of 20th century, it was common ideas in Europe that probably criminal law could solve nothing in this field, that probably we need to use absolutely different methods, medical methods or social methods, social work methods probably. And it's but nevertheless, again, it's very strange phenomena. This idea was not supported by sociologists probably and by psychologists. I don't know why. And those who develop these ideas actually find at least assistance and help, not in sociological department, not in psychological department, but namely in legal department. That it's became a kind of norm for development criminology in Europe. But it's a different story was in US, as you know. So also it was let's say a discussion, or might be just competition between two approaches. For example, criminal justice approach that actually located more closer to police schools, and sociological approach that actually located at universities. So probably because of Chicago School, and very very strong research, very effective, let's say, research in US, the criminology studied more associated with sociological research, and probably remember the famous statement of Sutherland, who says that crime is a sociological notion and criminology it's a sociological science. It's not legal science at all. So it's interesting. But why talking about it is I don't want to speak about about criminology in Europe and criminology in the US. I just want to say that what's happened in Lithuania. And Lithuania happened absolutely interesting issue. Of course, at least criminology was very strongly enrooted as a faculties of law. But we decided to do it in a different way. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I have no legal education, formal. My two formal education again, mathematics and philosophy, and I go from philosophy to sociology again because it was another field that during the Soviet Union was completely under the ideological control, and we need some new ideas, new person who could develop it. So it's there, it's a very interesting phenomenon in Lithuania. So when you became independent, you suddenly realize that social science should be just built from the level zero, and you need a person. So sometimes you have to work in different fields. So, and I work in sociology and especially sociological theories, and it was suddenly it was first exchange programs we faced with, and it was a program that's supported by some Western universities, for example, from North America, from Europe, but first of all from North America, and it was Canadian criminologist. At that time she was very young, Maeve McMahon, from Montreal. She came to us to teach sociology and criminology in English, and we get acquainted, and we start to speak about criminology. And she asked me, why you do not try to teach criminology for sociology? I say, okay, it's in our culture it's not very usual, and she advised me just start it, and you will see. So it was a good push. So we start from separate criminological courses. Usually they were more theoretical than practical. But after we created some kind of network. My colleagues coming from sociology, from economics, from also from law department, and in 1998 we already we were ready to create a master program. And it was first, let's say, kind of interdisciplinary approach to criminology. It's for 2 years program. This program existed until the last year. It was master program in sociology and criminology. So, and it was something different. Because sometimes when you say that, okay, we have criminology at the faculty of philosophy where I'm teaching, it sounds strange. What we have in common with philosophy and criminology? But sometimes we know that some philosophers were very hardly involved in development of criminological knowledge, but usually it's strange combination. But again, it's in this case our faculty of philosophy looks as a strange because the title of philosophy comes from the Middle Age.
Yeah, but what happened with the program? Because you
actually the idea was again I saw this idea of development of this program when I first of all communicating with Maeve McMahon. She comes from Montreal, and she shared his knowledge ideas about the Center of Criminological Studies at Montreal University. It was interdisciplinary center. Experts from economics, from sociology, from psychology and law come together and for developing some kind of teaching programs. And I decided that okay, it would be good to use the same program, just to create different different programs for criminology, for example, criminology and sociology, and criminology and psychology at first, under the umbrella of criminology. Criminology, and and some one branch, another branch, and something some communication between these branches. Unfortunately, it's easy to imagine the situation, but it's not easy to implement it because of the structure, institutional structure of knowledge. Uh, in any way, you have to be under the umbrella of one or another kind of science. So criminology could not be umbrella for sociology and so for psychology. It's logical, it's obvious. But at the same time, we will be able to create, for example, sociology and criminology under the umbrella of sociology and psychology and criminology under the umbrella of psychology. So we go in this way. A program for psychology and criminologists just after 1 year of experiment just stopped for further development, and we continue. We continue in until 2006-8, when we decided to now, on the basis of our experience, to redress our program. And it was a program with support of the European Commission. We have a special social fund grant for development of this kind of program. And in this case, we went in absolutely different direction. Of course, we improve our program, master program, sociology and criminology. It was completely redressed the program of psychology and criminology, and also we include the specialization criminology from law faculty. It was a very interesting combination. We called it interdisciplinary and interinstitutional study in criminology at Vilnius University. It was program. Under this program, we have three different programs. They administrated individually and independently, but in curriculum they were very much connected. And for administration of curriculum, we created the so-called Criminological Studies Center at Faculty of Philosophy. And the logic of this curriculum was that we have a core of pure criminological, and at the same time we have additionally programs for developing sociology, law, or criminal law in this case, or for example sociology. Some courses were obligatory and common for all. Some courses were not obligatory, but at the same time we work on some kind of methodical literature and so on. It was very strong. I believe it was very strong element for development of criminology in absolutely different way. So what's happened with this program? Okay, this program produced some criminologists. This criminologist later defended their PhD in sociology, some in psychology, and they became ready for developing new stage or new step of development of criminology for bachelor studies. So probably yes, you were involved as you remember in development of this part. So and we have a good core of professional criminologists who were ready to develop and to introduce bachelor studies, and we did it. We did it 6 years ago in 2018, and it was again it was interdisciplinary. It was based in the Faculty of Philosophy under the umbrella of sociology. But in this case, the curriculum was intentionally interdisciplinary. It based on sociological course, on criminal justice courses, psychological course. We just keep the same. Of course, there were pure criminological elements, and also with development of some other science. For example, at least in my imagination, and maybe it's with respect to heritage of Lithuanian criminology, I believe that biological aspect in criminology should not be just missed. Just recently, by the way, we just tried to introduce some biological courses in our in bachelor program. For example, biology of delinquent behavior. Deviant behavior. So it's a very interesting course that taught by professional biologists. So again, this program was it was for first time it was 3 and 5 years. Right now it's 4 years. It's more complete years, and the level of criminological knowledge of our absolvents in bachelor level became, which it's a strange phenomena, much higher than level of master studies. So we faced with problems that okay, we can continue the program, sociology and criminology, on the same level as it was, because newcomers, just better prepare, and their knowledge is much wider and deeper than, for example, the master. It's nonsense. So and we decided that we have to redress this program, and again last year we introduced just for new generation of criminologists. We just change master level. Right now, it's a program we call it's a applied and theoretical criminology. It's 2 year master program. So and this year we expect the first absolvents from this program. And again, what we expect is that some of them going to our doctoral studies. So, and it will be a next generation of criminologists. It will be absolutely different.
A very interesting phenomenon that you mentioned when you create a bachelor, then of course the master needs to be modified. I have observed that also in Portugal and Spain, where they have 4 years of bachelor,
Hmm.
then the master is difficult to adapt it. We discussed this changing. We have only the master and the PhD in Lausanne, but
Hmm.
then if you introduce the bachelor, you have to do what you said, or
Yeah.
maybe with the master, or maybe have two masters. One sort of general master for people who studied other studies, and then they get a general view, and a specific one. But it's a classic problem. Quite interesting, eh?
Yep. I think we right now we faced with this problem. We mentioned second master. It's a real problem because okay, we can close the master studies from others who want just to go, because criminology right now become very popular, and I can understand this phenomena. So of course in the beginning, when you get, for example, let's say 60 students on bachelor level, just for comparison, population in Lithuania 2.78 million. It's huge.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
huge amount of criminologists. Of course, I understood that it's sometimes some of them come just for fun, but nevertheless the rest just continue their studies in criminology, and it's interesting. And we have a 6 year the same interest. We can accept about 60 students per year at our bachelor studies. In our system of application, we can point the preferences. For example, you can apply it for criminology, you can apply it for psychology, for law, for geography, and so on. And among the person who plays criminology on the first place, there were 3 times more than we have places. This proportion still exists for already for 6 years. I can explain this phenomenon. It's it might be okay. We have the same problem with they at least let's say 20% from them comes to bachelor to master level, and we expected that this program will be completed by absolvent of bachelor program. But nevertheless, we faced with the problems that students with bachelor or even with master level already come to criminological master, and it's a problem for us because our courses on master level created with intentions that students already know some basic issues from research methods, from criminal law, from basic psychological issues, for example, delinquent sociology or something like that. And of course, when, for example, people come from different departments, we faced what we can to do with them, because some there are some lack of knowledge, and just yesterday we discussed this issue, how we can to develop this program. So what you said, that might be should be another master, open in the way that it was before. But again, it's the problem is that in terms of knowledge, they cannot compete with absolvent of first program. This is
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We also have this discussion, and I think the discussion is going on in many countries, how to find a program which is suitable for students who already have another bachelor. But we have this shortened version, and we look at it case by case, so to say. For example, people who already study psychology do not have to follow the methodology courses anymore. But we really try to, I mean, match. It's a difficult issue. I also thought it was very interesting what you said about the master. We have tried to develop a second year master. We have a bachelor program of 3 years and 1 year of master program. But there was a time when we also wanted a master program of 2 years. It exists in the French-speaking part of Belgium, but it was impossible because of financial reasons. And so a 2 year master program is very expensive. So well, I hope it works, because I think it has a lot of advantages, especially with regard to the quality of the master thesis. There is a possibility of, I mean, developing some specialties on methodology courses and theoretical courses. So I hope the will be a success.
Yeah, we also hope that it will be a success. But again, coming back to this problem with master program and ability to take master, for example, for others. So it's could be used, this schema that actually already implemented, for example, in US at US universities, for example, minor. When you, for example, good minor in criminology, for example, you can study sociology, for example, or psychology, but minor, it's presuppose that you have to collect some amount of credit during the course. So you can get your main diploma, for example, in psychology or in law, but at the same time you could have a minor in do minor in criminology. And in this case, it's could partly solve the problem, I believe, for those who interested in criminology, because we face with these problems that when we only introduce this program, we face that students that already started, for example, law faculties or engineering or something like that, they come to us with intention to start from the beginning. So, but in this case, nevertheless, the problem is still exists because you can provide minor for example, another university, because you can control only your university, but we have to be open to other universities, and also we have to be open to universities. Not in Lithuanian universities, but also for universities that actually are in Europe. And right now we face also with this problem. For example, one problem is that our Latvian young colleagues interested in this program. So and they ask what we want to do with this program. One of the possible development internalization of program. So to teach in English language. Of course, we use criminological courses in Erasmus. For example, I have two criminological courses in English. But again, it should be done in more systematic way. And again, for example, just recently we I have a case. So students coming, graduating. I believe it's York University in England. So come from bachelor level, a very strange composition of bachelor. It's philosophy, law, and psychology. Okay, it's might be school, but what to do with him? He interesting. He very motivated to study criminology, but he didn't have a criminological courses, and this profile looks strange for us at least.
Yeah.
So, but we need to do something.
And there is an issue there with the language that you mentioned before about the role of Russian, and so if we go to to the literature. You mentioned that during the Soviet domination, you could not have books from Western Europe. I know from the Western world, let's say.
Hmm.
I know that there was this manual of criminology made in Eastern Germany by Lexas Harland. So I wondered, what were you using at that time? What were you reading when you were a student? And the second one is you mentioned after that you published a book with your mentor, but at that time you couldn't publish in Lithuanian, but in Russian.
Hmm.
So what happened with that book? What are all these books hidden now?
I don't know if our books. Okay, it's already the ideas just translated in Lithuanian and in English language. For example, the book which one of the my it's written with myself. Just try to find it's a probably this book. It's a reception. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, it's just a moment. It should be focused.
Yeah,
No,
there.
not yet.
Not
Probably
yet.
not yet. It's only but it's a reception of criminal justice in society. Some basic ideas from this book here also in more precise form, by the way. So I'm not very much just concerned about it. Maybe it's like could be put as a kind of historical element of development because it's written more than 20 years ago. Oh no, sorry, 30 years ago. It's some ideas is okay. Some ideas I could defend. For example, even right now, for example, why we better to use term crime, not criminality. That it's okay, but it's discussion. If we're speaking about literature, what we're doing with literature, of course, there are, for example, textbook in Lithuanian language. Again, I mentioned before the program, the project on development of criminology, interdisciplinary criminology at Vilnius University in 2008. So according to this project, we published some methodological literature in Lithuanian language. And for example, one of the book was, we wrote it together with our colleagues, criminological theory in Lithuania. So it was absolutely different. It's have nothing in common with previous past. Even didn't mention because there are no, so. And as for Russian books, okay, I know that sometimes, for example, especially for lawyers, they use sometimes, or used, maybe not right now, because it's the distance between the Soviet Union and contemporary Lithuania 30 years, and it's at least two or even three generations already. Could be difficult to find direct links with past right now. Even myself, who actually I have experience, I live in two worlds, but even in my memory, I just about what happened, and sometimes when I remember, it's like, oh, it was with myself. It's a strange phenomenon, but again, it's I don't think that this so-called Russian books, I mean Soviet books, was some kind of value. Uh, Probably one value. I remember my youth when I first time just accidentally take this kind of book, criminological. It was, as I remember, titled Soviet Criminology. Soviet Criminology. That's interesting, yes. I just tried to, just to scroll it. And I say, never. I never studied criminology. Later, I found in Michel Foucault, this comments on contemporary criminology, boring criminology. It was so boring. It was so unacceptable for reading. I was acquainted with criminologists, not with stupid criminological books, but with criminologists who actually, just could produce ideas. And but right now we have, of course, for example, my students. One of the when I teach, for example, my colleagues who teach other criminological books. Of course, we are interested in literature in English. Nevertheless, when I go to my students, I say, okay, look, some books will be in English. So if you want to study criminology, be fluent, not at least for reading in English.
Yeah.
For example, some readings and some essays they wrote based on especially in my course, because I'm more interested in theoretical issue. So okay.
Very interesting. But the use of English textbooks often implies that you have the influence of probably mostly US or UK based theories.
Unfortunately, yes. Just during the conference in Malaga, it was did a presentation about linguistic imperialism. It's a problem, and problem in translation of very specific English term that actually we use, for example, in criminological language. For example, in most European language, including Lithuanian, there are no strict distinction between the policy and politics. Sometimes what we call as a criminal justice policy in native language translated as a criminal justice politics, which is absolutely nonsense, because it's presuppose political forces influence on criminal justice, on justice. I remember when I was a young criminologist, I read a book of a Canadian criminologist and legal expert, Peter Solomon. I don't know, have you read him? He wrote a fantastic book on Soviet criminology and after about Soviet criminal law, development of Soviet criminal law. Excellent. If you have chance to look, it's still valid. He just focused on this issue that in Soviet criminology they speak about criminal justice politics. In some sense it's okay, because it's in reality it was politics. For example, yeah. Gulag, it's consequences not of policy, it's consequences of politics. So it's clear. But when we right now, being a democratic state, speak about criminal justice politics, for example, we speak about integrity, especially when we have, for example, with research in corruption or something like that. Integrity, it's what does mean integrity? Is if you translate in again back, it's not a morality. It's not a sincerity. It's again a very specific term, and it need to be properly translated. Yes, we face this problem, especially and right now, for example, my students comes to me, they interesting in data crime or this online crime with very specific terms that are in English. For example, with do the crime in the field of false identity or false body, e-body identity, and that's it. How to translate? But from another point of view, I have had a very nasty experience with translation in Lithuanian language. David Matza, Delinquency and Drift. Sorry. It was my intention just to provide students with basic classic criminological theories, and I suppose it might be David Matz who actually was, let's say, it's not trigger, but he just made a shift from let's say positivist criminology to this new kind, let's say critical criminology. So and I suppose that it would be a good book on this issue. When I saw the translation, I understood that it was my biggest mistake, maybe to propose that this book should be translated. First of all, because language of David Matza, it's very specific. He not only create ideas, but he create language that actually should provide this idea. Yeah, terms. But biggest problem was with his principal distinction between subculture of delinquents. When I try to explain to translators that in Lithuanian books we need to have this translation, she didn't understand me what I'm doing. So consequences was that this book is prohibited for my students, Lithuanian, I mean. Of course, it's pity that we do not, for example, come even with classical book, for example, in European language, for example, Italian criminology, for example, or let's say, Norwegian criminology or French criminology, and for example, some basic ethos are now still absent. For example, like Tart, Gabriel Tart, for example, or even Emil Durkheim, not completely translated in Lithuanian. For example, his PhD dissertation on labor, and so.
I mean, it was a French book. If you translate it to English, you already see some differences.
Yeah.
So
I remember my discussion about Lacan. I was interested in Lacan, so in my discourse analysis. So, and I tried to read Eckert's this translation, and sorry, but I hadn't understood anything from this book. It was so sophisticated. And I asked Dragan Milovanovic, one of the most interesting criminologists in US, probably, at least for me, because he wrote some books on French social philosophy, social science, and affiliation with kind of criminological issues. And he mentioned Lacan, and I asked him how you get these Lacan ideas in so nice and understandable form. I learned Lacan from his book. He said, "Okay, it was very easy because I also read this Eckert's, and say I also didn't understand anything. Oh, it's a good. So what we did, I went to Paris and decided to find participants of Lacan seminar and reconstruct what has happened. And I believe it's a better way in this case if you want to understand. For example, in translation from one author to another, you have to be again a situation what in phenomenological sociology philosophy called as a being togetherness. You have to be together. You have to elaborate these ideas, in close environment. In this case, you understand what you're doing. But if, for example, you missed this moment of creating these ideas, of exchanging, the ideas, so probably you missed something very important in understanding very specific ideas. Like, for example, Lacan is an example, of course. But yes, it's a problem. It's a problem how we communicate in different language.
Thank you for sharing all this knowledge on the research, the teaching programs, the development of criminology. We have another topic on our topic list which deals with research topics and what kinds of criminological research paradigms are more or less dominant, or is the situation more like different paradigms are co-dominant, coexist? I don't know, it's different in every country, but we're very curious, of course, to know how the situation is.
In my philosophy of criminology, probably I could name three main paradigms in criminology. First, it's a classical one, or metaphysical paradigm, where we try to put description: what is a crime, what is a punishment, what is a guilt. So basic ideas. So another paradigm that actually put different questions, because paradigm, according to Thomas Kuhn, it's a way to raise questions and to get proper answer. So classic paradigm. Another term for this paradigm, if we speak in linguistic terms, it's semantic paradigm, because you have to find reference to specific terms. What is a crime? Okay, we can explain, for example, in Vicarian way, for example. Next paradigm is different. It's it's positivistic paradigms that are oriented not in metaphysical issues, like, for example, like social contract, or like free will, and so on, in very specific facts that comes from different department, at least in 19th century, and from biological, or, for example, from sociological department. So it's different approaches, sub-paradigm, for example. But in any ways, it's questions about why and how. So it's scientific questions. We go from criminological metaphysics to criminological science, and okay, at least again, for my understanding, first scientific criminologist was Adolf Hitler, Belgium, by the way. So because he was first who actually put mathematical methods, statistical methods for analyzing crimes. It was not questions about what is a crime. These questions are how it's possible that majority of young men just committed crime, and it's a eternal question for criminology. Why? Why it's happened? So, and the next paradigm is paradigm where we speak about not only about crime, but we speak about construction of crime. When we speak about institution that actually responsible for criminalization or decriminalization of some event, it's questions about who in terms of we have not on physical person, but usually institutional person. But institutional person also who. It's a paradigm. Okay, it's different paradigm. It's start probably to exist from the mid of 50, 60. Already mentioned David Matzo was just on this shifting process from one paradigm to other. Actually, construction paradigm it not means critical paradigm, because it could be evidence-based paradigm as well. So it's also constructed, but by different methods. Again, I'm going to my field of philosophy of criminology because I just tried to answer on your questions. What kind of paradigm and what because in social science differently than in natural science, you have coexisting paradigms. In natural science, for example, if you move from, for example, geocentric to heliocentric paradigm, it's okay. You never back, at least on scientific discourse back. But in criminology and other social science, you can just really coexist. So for me, at least, the classical paradigm still exists in the field. If, for example, if you look at crime, first of all, from the point of view of criminal law. So you take it uncritically, and you're more interesting in analyzing. For example, it could be even simple statistic, for example, but it's again you speak about crime as coming from criminal codes, from description, what does mean crime, and so on. It's you go, for example, for the cases, criminal cases in this case, to analysis, and it's very noble paradigm for me. Another one, it's if you go with research, usually using, for example, it's quantitative criminology, for example. It's clear around this positivistic paradigm, and again, I also could use criminological use and a lot of research. And again, if we look, for example, on contemporary awards in best article, so European Journal of Criminology, a lot of articles comes in this from this paradigm, and critical or maybe not critical, this constructionist paradigm, it's a different. It could work together with this paradigm, because then sometimes you come back again to classical paradigm, because you read descript crime from new point of view, how it's created, how it's in different stage of creation of constructing of crime. You're faced with different elements, for example, that comes from previous discourse. And if we speak about this paradigm, despite of this ideological aspect, it was more oriented, nevertheless, in the positivistic paradigm, because it was more managerial aspect. Because it's what actually we learned from positivistic paradigm. If for example you can fix factors that make an impact on crime, okay, you can control it. So controlling factors, you can control the issue. So, and if, for example, if you want to control, and if, for example, and usually government interesting in crime control and reducing crime and so on, so they inevitably need to get some data, some figures that actually could be elements of criminal justice policy for controlling and managing this crime situation in society. So it's again this paradigm was in Soviet Union, and I believe it's still continue right now. But again, what if we speak right now, what's happened with Lithuania? Yes, it was because criminology was developed mostly before in legal department. Of course, this first paradigm should be dominated. if, for example, I speak about my university and, for example, team which I am working, so probably we more oriented in critical aspect or constructionist paradigm. I don't want to call myself critical because even my second criminological teacher, Luke Hulsman, he is more than critical. He is abolitionist. And so, but again, critical criminology is usually affiliated also with kind of ideological elements, with so-called political economics of crime and this Marxist approach. So probably it's not so easy to be Marxist in post-Marxist society.
That's a very interesting topic, because we discussed this also with Jerzy Sarnecki, who escaped from Poland, and people were saying him, Why do you leave the communist paradise to come here to this rotten Western society?" So how do you feel about that? Because the fact that many of these critical criminologists, not all of them, but some were Marxists and some were imagining a perfect society. You lived in this society. When you were confronted to this reality, how did you feel about it?
Not good. I can tell you long stories about this paradise, about this perfect work. You can get some trauma. Just construct your reaction to the society. Uh, my first trauma was in my childhood when my parents sent me to buy bread to the shop. And it was the period when because of some kind of communist experiment in agriculture, the bread just disappeared. So we even have a joke. Person come into the shop and say, "Oh, and what we do not have here? Oh, we nothing have here." So it's but but you can imagine a young boy of the age of 7 or 8 that want to play football, right? But instead of this, he has to stand in the line for 2 or 3 hours. So just for nothing, and it's a shortage of goods in society. Actually it's just follow all citizens. But okay, it's okay. We can look critically on this case. Okay, might be it's consumerism, let's say. But another issue was that when I started to work, my PhD was first PhD was in philosophy, and it was about Western philosophy. And I realized that I had no access to book. So, and I need to get permission for some guys that I'm okay person for reading these books. So it was strange, and alongside it was a feeling that that you live in lying society, lying society. Soviet society, it was lying society. If you want to read something, you have to access to open sources. It was hard. Okay, I have access. Okay, I was lucky. I could read even Western magazines in this very specific place. In library, it was very specific place where you was allowed to read secret documents. Secret documents, for example, was a magazine Time. So something like New York Times.
Then you need some knowledge of English and
Yes, but of course. But okay, I graduated university and one of my course was English. So nevertheless, so in foreign language it was not prohibited. Thanks for God. So the level, of course, of teaching of English language was very specific. So I learned my English not in Lithuania but in Norway. So I have a very good teacher in English during my visit to Oslo University. If we start to speak about Soviet life, we speak between joy and sorrow. So it's combination because on the one side you just can understand how it's possible, but at the same time only one normal reaction on what on your experience. It was just irony and maybe loud laugh. But again, I don't want to say that completely all Soviet life it was in the dark or it was no light and so on. No, it's a life, it's human life, and socialization happened. Some human contact, some ability to talk. But I was lacking because of fact that from my studies at university around me was free-minded person, and especially in philosophy, we have a private circle where we can read Western literature, Western philosophy. So we educated in different way. So it's very strange opposition. It's not open opposition, not the opposition when you propose freely your ideas, but it's hidden. You have this closed circle, and you just in this closed circle you can develop some ideas, and some ideas was not new for us after independence comes. So it was our privilege maybe. In Soviet time, this paradise produced very specific negative reaction. First of all, to politics, to economics. So, and it's nothing. I was actually participated in this political life together with my friends. We create even political party. It was first
Ah,
liberal. It was first liberal party. Deputy chairperson of this party, Lithuanian Liberal Union. Okay, we participated in drafting some basic documents of independent Lithuania, for example, citizenship law that actually was based for election of independent parliament and so on. So it's again it was some kind of activities but what I want to say is that at least for Sakal where I come from, it was more or less clear that plan economics it's impossible. At least we perfectly understood the ideas of Hayek that plan economic is out to serve them. Austrian economic school was much more closer to us than Marxist political. Lately, I saw very interesting research about so-called anti-communist or anti-socialist mentality of former socialist countries.
mhm.
It's much bigger, and I remember that my first contacts with my colleagues in US, for example, or in Europe, academic. I mean, from academic circles was very strange because they look at us with kind of irony. You so engage in liberal democracy, but our democracy works differently. It's not like in the books. Okay, probably right now I start to understand that that it's a different issue what you read in the book and what you get in reality. So, but in any way, what we have, at least my generation, I believe, so that we have this not only this anti-communist mentality or anti-Marxist mentality, but also very, very, very specific feelings when you see the restoration of this kind of mentality in contemporary world. What many issues that I can see right now, I saw somewhere it already in different terms, in different ways, but it's like this. So again, I'm critical criminologist, but again, critical criminology could be not only Marxistian, it could be more libertarian as well.
Yeah, I have the impression that when I discuss with some of these colleagues that okay, they are critical of the society, which we are all are. The problem is that they think that this can be solved by introducing Marxist ideas on how to deal with society, and there's where the problem comes. Which would be the solution? I mean, we are critical about what we have, but what do you put to replace that? We know that Marxism doesn't work from practical experience, although they would say always, no, but they didn't understand Marx. This is always an argument.
Sometimes I agree that sometimes we look at Marx and his theory in kind of comics form, very superficially. I believe that each theory exists and could be understood in the context. Pierre Bourdieu, when he was asked about his Marxist roots and what his attitude to Marx, he said, answer in very nice form. His answer was, what do you think about the 4th of 1936? Do you use it?
That's, yeah, okay.
It's and no, I believe, for example, in my course, I have one course to my students. It's philosophical and sociological ideas of law. So I concentrating very much on the stage in development of legal theories that from Durkheim until Pashukanis. And Pashukanis is a Marxist writer who actually, I believe, presented in pure form what this basic idea, so at least of Marxism in criminal law. What does it mean? Where criminal law became a kind of administration of death. And you have to learn this logic because it's very important to understand what could be done after. And it's what could be done after. It's could have a different name. It could be not Marxism. So there are some basic patterns in theory that it's good to know. I can imagine that Marxism could be alive right now, because it's a product of 19th century, and it's a reaction on a very specific better version of globalization of 19th century. Globalization that happened, with development of again liberal order through private governmental companies, for example, with concentrating on this macro aspect and losing micro aspect, especially in social policy. So okay, I'm not Marxist, but I'm listening what Marx and other Marxists says. What are you doing with workers? What are you doing with exploitation? We can be blind to this issue. We can say that, okay, free market solves this problem. My question is when. As a sociologist, I perfectly understand the problem of social time. Yes, might be in future it will be solved. But what's happened with concrete person who live, just right now, and his age, just of only maximum age, for example, 80 or 90 years old. What we could produce, and this reaction, socialist reaction, it was reaction on this shortcomings of this liberal project. Of course, it could be solved differently, not through revolution, but it's happened as it's happened. It's happened that these tensions produced, as Polanyi wrote, First World War. In some sense, we again faced with this problem. Right now, we have a globalization, not beta version. Normal version. And probably we go to the globalization 2.0. I don't know. I hope so. But we have again the same tension, and we have again restoration of the same ideas and interest to Marxism. It's just refers that the problems that we have in 19th century we faced again, and we need again to solve this problem because the consequences would be very nasty for criminal justice as well. Because Pashukanis, who actually used, he was not only Marxist. He used theories that comes from Durkheim, from Duguay, and other legal socialist philosopher. And it was introduced, and practical consequences was a gulag. And when Niels Christie, in his famous book, wrote crime control as industry toward gulags, Western way, okay, look carefully. Maybe it's not only metaphor. Again, I'm not Marxist, but we have to learn Marxist lessons.
Yes, yeah. There is another question that we have here is about the influence of criminology on criminal policy in the country. But just as an introduction, you mentioned this problem of translating criminal policy and mixing it policy with politics. But this is one thing, and then on the other side, sometimes are the politicians who are in the power that introduce the criminal policy. And there, I remember that when we had the conference of the European Society in Vilnius that you organized in 2011, the Minister of Justice was there, and he was a relatively young guy, and he had been your student, if I remember correctly.
No, no, he is not my student because he graduated from Faculty of Law. I just knew him because we participated in one project. It was organized in the network of Source Foundation in Europe, and so we get acquainted with him. He actually comes from also from liberal liberal political sources, and yes, he was very. This time he was very bright, very young. But he was not a criminologist. He is a law, and I believe his PhD was connected with non-governmental organizations, legal status, something like that.
In terms of population, in a small country, people know better each other. There are not so many universities, and then perhaps the way of to reach the politicians and maybe propose them to introduce changes in the legislation that are evidence based or that are based in practical ideas from that have been tested could be easier. I don't know if it is really the case. I know that the laws are done by the parliament, but politicians play the role there.
Yes, of course, I can reject politicians' role, but again, it's two different lines. One line, of course, what we experienced 30 years ago. It's a real paradigm change in political sense. So we go from the closed society to open society. We go from the planned economy to market-based economy. So we come back to basic, for example, what we call Western values. Of course, right now it's a bit problematic. What does mean Western values, for example? But nevertheless, it was not based on what we have before. And young people, young politicians, better educated person, of course, they were just very much welcome to development of this issue. Another problem is a problem, not a problem, but it's a challenge was. That we from 2004 and 5 became members of Western international organization, supra institution, let's say, like European Union or, for example, like NATO. So again, it was very challenging for us because something what could be done would be done not because of our own will. Sometimes our will of our population was very strange. I remember my colleagues did research. It was opinion poll of Lithuanian population. It was in 1994 about preferences, and and they were surprised, and I also surprised when they present me this data, that majority of population at that time was oriented in still in paternalistic economy, closer to planned economy, and voted for the strong hand. Of course, because of economic, social situations at the time was, just not good. So what does it mean? It means that, for example, if they will, they probably will restore kind of Lithuanian socialistic republic, probably, and not Soviet, without Moscow, without Russians. But pattern was like this because again because experience was very narrow, experience only of the past experience where the state just control and provide you with basic goods and basic service. Again, if you want to do something different, you need new person, new minds, and those who are educated. And again, when we entered in this institution, and before entering, it was a specific period when we have to prepare it. And by the way, it was some research in criminology, if you speak, nevertheless, not only about politics but about criminology. Some criminological research also were initiated not only because of, for example, our free will, but because of needness. Because, for example, there were some concern about, for example, about organized crime in Lithuania in 90s. It was a very big concern about corruption, what we have to do with corruption. And probably we were not very much successful in this case with organized crime, but in corruption, for example, in organization of anti-corruption activities and research anti-corruption. So we did a very interesting work. But again, this was impossible, for example, if it was done only by ourselves. But it was done because it was needed. And again, agenda for in this case, even for some kind of research, criminological research or criminal justice research was initiated not from inside but from outside. And of course, we needed some persons, some new guys who actually needed. Just one example, if we speak about this. For example, it was example of abolition of death penalty. We became a member of Council of Europe. So we have to abolish death penalty, Protocol number 6. So okay, if we look at the time opinion polls, about 80% of population for the death penalty. Council of Europe say, okay, look, it's your signature, and you have to follow it. When we signed this protocol, so not protocol, but so agreement with Council of Europe, there were no requirements to abolish death penalty immediately. It was principal decision. Later, it became more strict decision. For example, Armenia, who signed this agreement with Council of Europe, should, as I remember, had to abolish death penalty for 2 years, and it was a very interesting situation. They were just on their one step for just asking to leave Council of Europe because they didn't want to abolish death penalty. They abolished death penalty, I believe, some hours before this final decision could be made. But coming back to Lithuania, so it was a problem for us how to insist Parliament to abolish death penalty, for example, and to sign this protocol number 6. Produce its kind of research on the abolition of the death penalty. It was done. We did it in we have not at university, but it was a non-governmental organization, human rights center. So there is a team of researchers from different universities. So just decided to look what we can do, because we have data. And again, we have yes, it was Roger Hood ideas. That that we have to be very carefully with death penalty. I read his comment on the opinion polls, and he first just point on the fact that okay, there is not only opinion poll, just general, but it's there are informed citizens and just citizens. So what questions we answer? And on this basis, we just redress our questionnaires. We decided, just to say, to ask not questions are for or against, but go with questions like what's happened if, for example, if dangerous criminal will be, for example, resocialized or, for example, isolated completely, and immediately number of 80% for death penalty reduced until 50, until 65%. So, and it was presented to politicians, and it's again this campaign was done. So, but again, this method which we used after it was used in other countries, for example, in Albania, we just go with these ideas in former Yugoslavia and so on. But the idea is that my point is that this research sometimes, and people who actually could do it, they come not only because of we decided to do it. but because it was requirement, and sometimes okay we have. I remember the question was about the field of our research, how we where we find money for this research. So continuing this again, I say that it's a combination of our own interest and something that actually needed to do. So there are, for example, funds that actually comes from abroad. At least, for example, in my case, I believe that at least in doing my research in corruption, for example, or in death penalty or in media and crime, it's based not only on the local funds. It's based on international funds. For example, very important role, at least for Lithuania, play Soros Foundation in publishing criminological book, in supporting criminological project. Again, my project on media and crime, which I started about more than 20 years ago, was funded by just from this network. Research on discourse analysis in 90s was funded by NATO Foundation. So it was really support not only with agenda but support with with initiation of this. Right now we probably have a different situation because we have well elaborated national funds. For example, we have Lithuanian Scientific Fund where we can apply it for doing criminological research. And at the same time, we have some local resources at universities. University also support us, for example, maybe not in such. But again, there are European networks and there are a lot of foundations. So in this case, probably we in this more or less the same situation like other universities in other European countries. Of course, the problem might be that different university has a different funds. It's well known, for example, Netherlands universities, better in fundraising than, for example, than Spanish university or Lithuanian university. It's absolutely clear. But in this case, it means that you can do your research. It's a matter of maturity of criminological network. What you want to do. I remember, Marcelo, when you met with our department and you just explained this way how, for example, young researcher could start. Just follow the line, follow the groups who already do something. Start from the first step, not try to solve general global problem in criminology. Start from small researchers and learn what team is doing. And from this point of view, I believe European Society of Criminology did a good job, especially with these groups that actually usually have their own teams, or networks, or journals, and I believe it's very good good means for developing this criminological talents, and and actually we already use it. So at least in Lithuania.
Okay, and maybe one last question. This is a sort of bonus question that we've been using. We discovered that leads to interesting discussion. Is how crime has changed in your country during your lifetime?
Ooh. I believe that I lived at least during my time in two different worlds. My very specific attitude to let's say to official or bureaucratic line. Sometimes I say to my colleagues that we suppose that in human life we live from January 1st until December 31. So we just try to organize our life in according to financial time. But our life, of course, not financial, but our life is life through generation. Different generation, different circumstances, different threats, different challenges, and again, what I just try to answer on your question, reflecting what I can say. It's for my generation.
Yeah, let's go
for
with your generation. Your generation. Let's
of a financial years.
no, your generation. What you lived. Even you can make the distinction between the first period and the second one, the after the independence.
From the first sight, it's look like easy question to say what happened with old generation. For my generation, belong to the elder generation. Again, my answer would be okay because it's bonus. It will be not straight. A bit, a bit with prehistory. I remember I was invited in one TV show. It was about crime situation. One of the participants, very famous person in Lithuania, she was already pension. Say crime situation in Lithuania terrible, so terrible that I can get out from my house to carry garbage. And I was a bit younger than she, and I ironically asked her, "What's wrong with you? Why?" She looked at me with surprise. You didn't see TV news? You never read newspapers? Yes, of course. I saw news and read newspaper because it's my field of my interest. But after I started to think about reality of this person, because we live in one reality of expert, but at the same time there are reality of ordinary person. And for ordinary person, the crime is terrible and is growing. And even right now, for example, if you ask what's about crime level and if it's safe to live in Lithuania, say, oh no, look how terrible it is. But if you look at statistics, we say the statistic reduced drastically. For my understanding, okay, again, I just tried to combine these two realities. Okay, right now probably we did not see much TV sets because we live in different world. And what I fixed first of all, we live in different world. Before speaking about crime, I say we live in different world. That's it. And in this different world, of course, we have to behave differently, and we have to relate because crime all the times it's a questions about safety. Because there are no crime as such, there are different kinds of crime, and if we speak professionally, and in different kind of crime we have a different risk to be victims of this crime, and it's very important. From this point of view, it's you go in different situation. You have to go with statistic and say, okay, look, statistic could dramatically change. Reducing of violent crimes, reducing of homicides. For example, homicides, let's say 20 years ago, was huge. It was about 10% per 1,100 population. It was highest level of homicide in Europe. Right now it's reduced. I remember it was about 510, if I remember, in 1995. Right now it's about 73 or something like that. It's dramatically changed, of course. Of course, we faced with problems that the structure of crime differ. But again, in Soviet time, for example, there were no reliable statistics. It was only rumors. Probably nobody expected that, for example, so-called crime related to property or property crimes or economic crimes, just should occupy it from 60 or 80% of all type of crimes that are registered by official statistics. So it was obvious. It was obvious that at least in public discourse and political discourse, this type of crime became more visible. At the same time, again, life became more safe, but at the same time, it became more tricky because people come in this new environment again that connected with so-called e-society. We're living in a society, in virtual society, or let's say society that actually just merged reality with virtuality. Yeah, it's hybrid society, yes, but hybrid society presupposes that you endangers, and sometimes you even can understand to what extent you're endangers. For example, even using these facilities like we are doing right now. And statistically and practically, we see a concern about this type of crime. It was not only invisible, but rather it was a kind of anecdotal crime. For example, I remember in my youth, it's not an online crime, but it was because internet still not existed, but it was electronic crime using computers for just for fabrication of report, financial report, and and using this elements to taking extra monies. It was even in Soviet time. It was just curious, but it's right now it's became a mainstream, more and more mainstream. We use this understanding of crime first of all for one statistics, but statistics it's usually referred to institutional statistics, to how institution works, to what extent they just could just take these cases for recording and for investigating and for managing. It's a very tricky issue. Of course, we can speak about dark statistics, but what does it mean dark statistic? What does it mean dark crime? At least from in classical discourse, it's nonsense because it should be recorded. So-called latent crime, it's or invisible crime, it's tricky issue. And in this case, another issue comes from crime what in public discourse, crime what we get from media role in presenting crime situation. And again, it's much more so than official statistics, of course, because manipulation of media, because what Thomas Matheson called as a synopticon effect, when we just could, for example, fixed on one type of crime but forget about another, and we face with overrepresenting of crime or underrepresenting of crime and missing of very important crime. For example, I believe that we have sometimes in many countries we have to be more concentrating and more creative, so-called what we call organized crime. Again, it's a very specific term, but some issue completely missed. In financial area, so-called very close to what Sutherland called as a white-collar criminality, we are very much concerned about this issue. So, and how we get his data. If you ask about my attitude to changing of crime, I just only want to say one issue, what I feel. Of course, society became much more safe than it was. It's my feeling. Maybe some other person, if especially victims of crime, disagree with me. For my understanding, life improved in terms of criminal justice service. It's improved in direct threat of crime. But at the same time, of course, we have different issues. And again, what is important, I forgot to mention it, it's our sensitivities to very specific crimes. For example, my experience with research on corruption. When we start research on corruption in public sphere or in political sphere just was not existed. It does not mean that it was not existed, but it was not fixed. And for example, in political programs, Lithuanian parties' political programs about 20 years ago, there were no lines about corruption. Only one party. It was only one line. So we have to do something. Right now, we have absolutely different situation. What was possible to do, and nobody take care about it. For example, 10 or 15 years ago, impossible today, because different form of attitude to this issue. Again, it's not only outer control, it's inner control, inner understanding. So we change a lot. I saw a dramatic change. I don't know if other people, for example, from other ages experience the same changes, technological at the same time, social, political, cultural. It's amazing. It looks like we come in this life as a one person and going end of in other words, absolutely different person.
Yeah, so many changes. I mean, for the generations born, I don't know, since 1950s, let's say, until now, the changes that this generation went through. It's funny when the new generations criticized what happened, but the capacity of adaptation is terrible. But perhaps just one thing. So you said, and we know that the homicide went down in Lithuania,
Yep.
that you had a high rate. Which, according to your opinion, would be the cause of this drop? How do you explain this decrease in homicide?
Interesting issue. I believe different. Some of my colleagues, by the way, have a bit critical vision of these trends. Just during Malaga conference, I presented this theme, and I just look at the trends of decreasing of homicide in Lithuania and suicide. Strange in sense that there's a correlation, person correlation, 0.95, 92.
Well,
It's linear. Yep. Wow. When I saw, I said, wow. Because if there are different research on correlation between homicide and suicide, worldwide it's no correlation actually. Some correlation in Europe, by the way. Question: why in Europe? Why not in Asia, for example? It's interesting, by the way. But in Lithuania, it's just linear. Again, my explanation. Of course, I don't want to go with conspiracy theories that it's artificial.
yeah.
We can imagine, but again, I say that some of my colleagues say that it's something strange with registration.
But then you would need a complot of police, but also of doctors, medical doctors, because you
Yeah.
have two sources. So they
Yes,
would
exactly.
combine and both would show that homicide is going down. It's difficult.
Yeah.
So, and just for our listeners, so when you mean this correlation, it means that suicide is a negative or a positive correlation. I mean, suicide is going
Positive,
down also.
positive.
Okay. So both are going down.
No. If it would be negative, okay. In this case, it would be artificial. Yes, it's for sure. It's well-known phenomenon, and you just could just re-register it. For example, homicide like a suicide. It's it's easy, but no, it's down in both cases. But again, for me, suicide could be kind of, let's say, key for answer, because I just immediately remember Emil Durkheim. Emil Durkheim and his conception of enemy. Enemy actually that presuppose that that enemy, and later it became a strain theory, because it's not the same, of course, but very closely related issue. And enemy presuppose that some tension, because values vacuum, that person who prepared to one world, just faced with different world, where she or he just feel alienated and without request for needness. It's like in famous Chinese story about famous Chinese poets who actually commit suicide because he realized that emperor do not want his his knowledge from. So it's famous phenomenon. So and something like this in Durkheim explanation of suicide, that it's happened. What we saw with homicide in Lithuania, and it was already noticed by foreign researcher, for example, Anderson from Canada. He just used disorganization this methodology for analyzing distribution of homicide, and he connected homicide with consumption of alcohol. And we did our research about 6 years ago, and analyzed cases. And about more than 60% of all cases is drinking alcohol. in so-called close company. What they're doing? It's because in this case, very simple explanation is because of alcohol. But my question's a bit different. Why alcohol? Why people drink alcohol? What is the sources, or what is the root of this very strange cultural tradition? Absence of drugs for against depression, trying to solve alienation problems. People just disorganized and just take out from communities, and only under the usage of alcohol we can go back to our roots and to normally communicate with each others. In this case, we go not with the explanations that do alcohol usage. My question is why alcohol usage? And again, if, for example, if alcohol is a let's say is a drug for solving social problems, and if social problems became solved better, and if, for example, social problems do not create a tension strain for society, maybe it's explanation why we have this trend. In these terms, this enemy situation, became like an answer for explanation of this. Okay, it's my hypothesis. I try to explain or try to answer on your questions how it looks for me.
Thank you, Aleksandra. So we've been talking for a couple of hours, huh?
Oh.
And I think we got a lot of interesting information. I don't know, Lieven, if there's something that we didn't treat in the discussion.
No, actually, we discussed a lot more, and that makes this interview very unique. So we have the answer on all the questions we prepared and some additional information. So this is a very rich and unique interview. So for which I really want to thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I just thank you for joining us today. Thank you for following Lieven and Marcelo's Criminology podcast. This podcast is edited by Eduardo Coco from the University of Lausanne. Our theme song is Seagull's Night, Noche de Gaviotas, composed by Gustavo Cantero, arranged by Tato Germano, and played by Tato and Gustavo with the voices of Sasha Conte and Alejandro Turco Guyot. Your host are Lieven Pauwels from Ghent University, Belgium, and Marcelo Evi from the University of Lausanne, Switzerland. Cheers, and see you soon.